but I thought I'd ask.
There you go.
There you
Right,
go.
perfect.
Thank
So
you.
we'll go over certain, yeah, no problems. This is good stuff. So, we'll go over some of these products that you see on the list over here for data science, process, and change. And just to kind of, recap what you might have heard in the previous meeting, this is a pictorial representation of the entire product suite that belongs to the cognitive operating system, the platform itself. Starting with the data crawlers that connect with your source systems, bring in all that information raw, and then process that information to build a cognitive data layer. The science part, which includes basic analytics, reporting, dashboarding, discovery, insights, which is the ability to join different reports together on the fly and derive insights from them. Even though the reports could be at the different levels of granularity, you could still derive those insights with discovery. The modeling capabilities, which is multi-dimensional modeling and building all the planning views at any levels of granularity, slicing and dicing of information, building scenarios, projected inventory. How does your projected inventory look in a certain scenario against capacity, against other resources, and then of course material availability and whatnot, and other fluctuations like a pandemic, for example, right? So you could build those scenarios, slice and dice information with the modeling capability, and then there is Cortex, which is the data science platform within our core cognitive operating system there as well, right? So I'll flash some of these things today as well. And then you have the process side, which is the brain, the digitized brain, the way we digitize a particular process through the process builder itself. By and then the automation rules, which at a higher level of abstraction kind of orchestrate, how the brain actually works and what it should do when and why and how. And then of course the write backs, the scrollers that we talked about earlier, those are bidirectional, patented and bidirectional in nature. So, you can ultimately close the loop in, bringing automation, cognitive automation, and then automation through augmentation as well within the crawler capability itself. And finally, the change. This is where you receive recommendations, right? How do you change things? How do you manage things? How do you monitor things? How does that change look like when it's machines doing the work guided by people versus people doing the work manually on spreadsheets or different systems, legacy systems, planning systems, and whatnot, right? So that change part comes with the cognitive workbench, where you receive recommendations, you act on them. The decision board allows you to monitor things, measure things, how they were against the actions taken in the past. And then, of course, the dynamic user interface and user experience through search, voice, and mobile capabilities, through our Era app on iOS and Android as well, right? So that's the core platform capability as a part of our cognitive operating system. And today we'll touch a little bit upon the manufacturing side of things. Yeah. Any questions so far before I jump into the product?
No, looks good. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. So we talked about data. And I know in the last session you went through the metadata, you saw all the formulas, you saw all the logic. But data still remains the most fundamental thing that powers and is the foundation to all the analytics, data science, and the cognitive automation skills within the platform. When you log into the system, this is the front home page that you see. You have a search window over here that does Google-like search for you, and I can search for, pretty much most of the supply chain master data entities within the search engine itself. So, for example, if I'm in manufacturing, I'm most concerned and most closely tied to all my suppliers that are supplying all my raw materials to my factories. And I want to search for a vendor, and it automatically starts populating and giving me suggestions, just like Google search, on specific vendors that are worth paying attention to as of this period that I'm working on, right? So if I click on this first particular vendor, it starts giving me this full visibility across that particular supplier, right? A vendor. And the beauty of this is that this vendor code is not just sitting in one system. It could be sitting in 20 different systems. Most of our large customers in the pharma and CPG space, it's like 20, 30 different ERP systems, 10 to 15 different planning systems, a plethora of spreadsheets, through which they bring in information of different types, different procurement systems, supply chain finance systems, and financial planning analysis systems. All that systems information comes into Era, it's harmonized. So this vendor code could be sitting in 5 different products or softwares or spreadsheets. but it's pulling in that data from all those and then giving you the calculations on these measures and KPIs, right? You know, what's my delivery about, um, what are my open quantities, what's my on time, how many of them from the supplier have been on time in terms of delivery. I can also see something that's data science centric in terms of predictions, right? I can predict which suppliers are potentially going to be late. As a result, which materials are going to be impacted, finished goods materials are going to be impacted. I can review my spend for this particular vendor itself in terms of what was invoiced, and then I can look at a global map of which other vendors are available for me as well, right? And there are related results for this particular entity, right? This particular vendor, wherever this vendor is in terms of reports and dashboards, wherever that entity exists, it gets results up for me as well, right? Same way, I can search for customer, I can search for, a part, I can search for plant, I can search for plant, right? So I can search for all the factories, that are there. I can look at a plant cockpit, with a single search, which kind of gives me this end-to-end view of my factory and whatnot, right? So again, this was not fully enabled there, but you get the picture that with a single search, I can get a lot of insights in one place. Now, you may ask, how does this information all come together? And, how do you have all these KPIs and how are they built and whatnot? So I'll just quickly glance through the metadata part over here, which kind of, shows you a very a good front-end view of all the different supply chain and finance KPIs that we have pre-packaged and out of the box built in Air. Some of them are, front-end KPIs. Some of them are, back-end KPIs. Um, if I say, for example, click on this cold chain, of course, it opens, dimensions and measures related to my cold chain in my pharma sector. And then I can look at, transactional data and the dimensions across master data as well. But then I can also look at all the measures, the formulas or the KPIs that are built for, a specific cold chain in terms of highest value, lowest value, cold chain market, overall total cold chain market, etc. I can look at inventory, for example, all the way from material movements, that, kind of our transaction level detail for inventory, inbound, outbounds, etc. Movement codes, movement types, all built into it, to full stock analytics, inventory snapshots, inventory turn analytics, etc. If I click on, say, for example, stock analytics, it gives me a lot of different measures, right? And these are dimensions first, which parts, plans, where am I shipping, where is the movement, where is the goods coming from, where is it going out, which plants are carrying that, which storage locations are carrying that. So all that master data around my location masters, plant masters, material masters is captured through the dimensions. And then I talked about the formulas, the measures, right? So you can see just for this one folder under inventory, under stock analytics, we have a lot of different out of the box KPIs. And
Hey,
as I
Prashant,
mentioned,
can I ask a question?
yes,
What's my total cost of inventory end to end on a brand? Do you have a report for that? The total
absolutely,
value of my
absolutely,
inventory from my throughout my entire network and where that
absolutely.
is?
Yes, yes. So that is a part of the pre-built KPI as well, right? So we have total cost. You can see this unit total cost, unit other cost, unit overhead cost, total unrestricted value, total restricted value, on-hand amount, on-hand work in progress. Every single cost element associated with your finished goods inventory and your bill of material, raw material, packaging material inventory is captured in this KPI list, right? And then you can also see what's expiring,
Yeah.
and and you can map this out across the different locations, because you saw that the master data elements are tied. This measures are tied to not just the material itself, but the location in which this material exists, which plants this material exists, whether
So
that's a
let's,
factory plant or a
yeah,
DC plant.
that's all. And then anything in transit and things like that
Yep,
is
yep,
covered as well.
absolutely,
Um,
absolutely.
Kaushal,
hold
are
on,
you able to go
oh,
ahead? Go
no,
ahead, Jason.
go ahead, Mark. Yeah.
I was just going to ask, are you able to capture the in-transit inventory in the case where there's not a stock transfer order for SAP, but more of a SOPO relationship?
It's the same
Uh,
question that I was going to ask. Yeah.
Of course.
Exactly the same.
Beat you to it.
Yes. So not only that, even more granular, because I mentioned the material movement codes. So even if you don't have a stock transfer order, you can look at the goods issued from a specific plant. goods issue date for a specific material from a specific plant, and a goods received metric there from on the receiving plant, and then also identify the in transits there. But more often,
Okay.
in some of the cases where we are building, ATP, for example, right, with full on supply allocations, in that particular case, it's very obvious that we are using the material movement codes, right? So what's an outbound transaction and inbound transaction into a plant and out from a plant, right? So that
Okay.
kind of helps us that the outbound transaction happened on this date, this timestamp. Inbound transaction happened on the receiving plant this date, this time. So this is my lead time, this is my in transit time, and this is how much stock is being moved from this location to
So
this
that's
location.
awesome. But let's just say I had a forward projection need to look at my
Yeah.
inventory. How would you do that?
I
Do
will
you have
show
some?
that to you
Well, I don't
in the
want to
demo.
say how would you do it, but do you have that capability? Yeah.
Yeah,
And then,
absolutely, absolutely.
and also, are you able to show the value of inventory that has not yet been goods receipt? So, if you're in the middle of a process order, you've completed 2 of the operations of the 3. There's obviously some value of that inventory. Are you able to see it prior to GR in these metrics, or does it have to become physical inventory from a GR perspective?
No, the planned inventory and planned projections, are part of, the
Well,
capability there as
yeah,
well, right? So it's not just
yeah,
the physical one, but also
yeah.
the
So
planned one.
projected inventory based on availability is one thing, but actually understanding the cost of the inventory that's in process, like truly not GR'd, right? So it's still the process order has not yet been GR'd. Do you have the ability to capture that value? It's just one of our other gaps that I'd be interested in.
Yeah, everything that is work in progress balance,
Okay, got it
is
there.
already there. Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, this is a very exhaustive list of KPIs, and then the beauty of this is also the fact that you can customize this, right? So, for example, I have this on-hand amount with work in progress. I can edit this measure, and put a different formula. I have the source reference mapped to that particular work in progress in SAP. So I know which tables that inventory is coming from. Every single formula that I'm showing you here is mapped to a physical table in your SAP or an Oracle ERP, or a planning system that exists, right? That's why when we say understand, recommend, predict, and act, this understand part means we understand every single transaction or a cell within a column within a table in your SAP or your ERP or your planning books, very well. Unless you had certain data sets in custom fields, which is very common in large organizations. In that case, we would, instead of this table, we would map it to a different table that you said that it doesn't exist here in AUFM or MARC table. It exists in some other table, then we'll map it to that. But otherwise, you can see the source reference are also mapped out. There is a formula tab. Now you can see that this is blank. That means this is a backend measure. I can show you the backend and also show you the full, the code that actually captures this logic here. But if I wanted to build something new or custom, I can build a new measure on my own because I have all the data in one place, based on all the different master data and transactional data elements that I have over here, right? So I can actually write a measure, very easily in this window over here. I can define what that new measure means. I can save that measure, that formula, that KPI, and I can certify it, right? I can click on certify as an admin, and then nobody would be able to change it besides other admins who have created that new measure. So I can customize what you get out of the box in terms of KPIs, but I can also create some new stuff and certify it, for the use for the teams.
So when I look across this full set of information, and we go in and ingest, say we're using standard SAP, whatever, and I go, and let's just say we are using SAP the way it was designed. We ingest the data. How much of this really actually works right out of the box?
If it's in the standard tables that we have mapped, then it works right away, right? So that's why we claim to, you know, uh, very confidently say that once we, install the crawlers and start crawling your raw data from these specific SAP fields, because we know that data is going to be used for this KPI, and that's what that data means in that table in SAP. So we say that, within 2 weeks max, we can give you an end-to-end visibility on standard KPIs that's coming in from standard fields in SAP. Unless there was some custom fields, then our solution architects would quickly go and, just map it to the right fields and then reprocess it. But that raw visibility, unvalidated, first cut comes to you in a matter of 2 weeks, right? So it doesn't matter how big your SAP instance is or how many SAP instances.
I get it. Okay.
We really focused on time to value because people are used to living in a world where when dealing with something in SAP, it's years and millions. So the value proposition here is time to value.
Yeah, but you can't make me look bad, Tom. I've been doing
I
that for a
understand, sir.
while. No, I'm only kidding. I mean, really, I don't have a problem with it. I think that that's always been the problem. But this is good.
All right.
What
Now,
what
now
can't
we
you
have the
what I'm sorry, what can't you do and why? Like what? See, I mean, we can go and say, can you do this? Can you do this? And of course you can. But what really causes like some significant consternation, like in being able to achieve it when you look at your customer base?
We primarily play in the space, of cognitive automation and augmentation, right? And the foundation of it is this data. So what I intend to do today is, show you stuff rather than talk to it. So, for example, you mentioned work in progress or this inventory, that inventory amounts, etc. I was starting to show you everything as you were asking questions, and that's what I intend to do today. But there are certain things that we don't do, right? And that's not where we play either, right? So, for example, uh, you know if you say, can you do detailed scheduling, factory scheduling, today, hour level scheduling that APO, does or OMP does, then we don't do that today, right? Today we don't do it. And is it a part of our skills center of excellence roadmap? Yes, it is. Is it going to be like 3 years after it comes? No, it's going to be somewhere within the next
Right.
12 months that it may
Well,
come up,
let's
right? So
pick
those
on
are the
that a
things.
little bit. Can I ask you to constrain a plan that I don't constrain?
Yes, you can, and I'll show you that. Actually, I'll
Okay.
show you a
I'm going
constraint plan
I'm
in
going
the
to let you go. You go.
Yeah,
All
let's
right. No,
jump
but
into
don't
those
hesitate
planning
to ask.
elements.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. Don't hesitate to ask questions and interrupt. I think let's make it as interactive as possible, right? And we have limited time, but happy to just do another session if needed, if you're on our time. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
So the next step when you see all this data is to get visibility on KPIs, right? So if I show you, say, for example, a manufacturing control tower, and if I look at capacity analysis, this is a standard dashboard in Era. Again, dashboarding, reporting, discovery, analytics is all modeling, is all self-service. You don't need us to build these pretty dashboards. Uh, you can put your logo, you can add more charts to it because you have all the data that's available, and you can put more reports into the dashboard. Doesn't matter, right? It's all on you. You can add more filters, drill downs by country, by other details, per factory. But this is a standard dashboard that shows you the power of a manufacturing capacity analytics, right? So, look at the details of these measures over here, which is very relevant, right? Planned downtimes, unplanned downtimes. This is actuals plus your projections, right? So planned downtime, for a specific period, you know what that is. Cleaning downtimes, defrost, startup times, mechanical downtimes. The setup times, which is the time you take to organize everything. All that
How
is captured in this. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
how are you capturing the downtimes? I mean, this has to be from like something outside of SAP, right?
Yeah, so it's mostly pre-calculated in Era. Some of the measures that are not standard measures in SAP, we have to build it in Era, right? So we write a logic to kind of calculate these downtimes based on certain data sets and parameters, right? So there's always a way to capture the actuals, the change times, the downtimes. And in some cases, our customers, do give us the data that's, already pre-calculated in their planning systems or some other systems. Um,
Okay.
but if it doesn't exist, then we will rebuild this measure. Like I showed you, we can build a custom one. We build it in Era. But
So
these
you
ones are
take
now
the
we have a logic
variables,
for it.
or we can give you, say, an output it from like CMO1 or something like that.
Yeah, your manufacturing MES systems, or if you use MES, you can give us data from
Yeah.
there. Yeah, we'll take that at the lowest level of detail and we'll build this. But every single measure, the KPI that you see here, that means we have a backend logic. Unless it was just a measure a KPI that we just brought in as an input,
Right.
we'll most likely have a logic for it. We'll review that logic with you. If that makes sense for you, that's great. If it doesn't make sense, we need to customize and we need more data. We'll do that during the review sessions.
So
kick off workshops and all.
So show me how my plan projects capacity utilization of resources and preferably like, let's say multiple resources, like forward looking, right? So I got planned orders in the future for the next 90 days. They're driving against a magnitude of pieces of equipment. What does the utilization look like? Where do I focus from a planning perspective to either, postpone or pull forward planned orders to then level load that capacity analysis? Can we go through some of that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So if you give me 5 more minutes to just show you some of
Sure.
the,
Sorry about
the
that.
introductory, and no, that's perfect. It's a great question. So, and today maybe I may not have a very specific example that's tied to what you're asked right now, but you can at least get a good understanding that okay, if this is there, then that means you can do this also, right? So that kind of
Okay.
flavor also you need. Yeah. So there, just another view, right, from just a work order management, which is basically your production order that goes on different lines. But you can look at it by different things, right? You can look at it by planner groups. You can look at it by order types. You can look at the order revisions. Look at what's and I'm not going to drill down into each and every filter. And just look at all these details over here, right? But there's orders by materials, orders by priority, your compliance, your manufacturing compliance, right? So, something that you can see as well. Calibration, I'll show you a skill on, calibration. Here, I don't have data for calibration, but preventive maintenance, work orders, compliance, backlogs, and then of course the detailed reports around, some of these things and at the work center level detail is also something that you might appreciate, right? Because at the end of the day, what powers this, these hundreds and thousands of KPIs out of the box, and the analytics at the lowest levels of drill downs is what is very important. This stuff around quality, right? This is something that's also very important. There's a lot of quality KPIs and quality skills that we have built, that continuously help you improve, your batch qualities at the raw material level detail. Um, you know, and then all the other KPIs around that as well, right? So there's a lot of plethora of information, and of course this is actuals plus planned stuff. So it just doesn't reflect what has happened in the past, but it also reflects what will happen in the future, right? So when you see all this KPI, and again, I don't want to undermine, the power of analytics. I don't want to undermine the power of visibility that you have over here. It's all very helpful. It's all very useful. Our customers use it day in and day out operationally every single hour. Thousands of them use it. But at the end of the day, what you now want to start doing on top of this is, digitize, the basically in a simple way to say, digitize how humans read these KPIs and dashboards, right? So when you look at so many numbers and so many KPIs and so many dashboards and hundreds of reports, and on an average, if you look at one pharma company that we are working with on this manufacturing use case today, they have 700 dashboards and 3,000 reports that are being generated and refreshed on a daily basis. This is a small numbers on the smaller side. But who has the bandwidth, honestly, to go through these KPIs and the reports and dashboards and really make a good judgment call on what needs to be adjusted and when and why and how? It's not possible. And I'm showing you analytics, I'm showing you the power of it, but I'm myself contradicting what I just showed you by saying that, who has the time? And that's where cognitive automation comes in play, right? You mentioned, show me something that's forward looking, show me something that's, going to take care of my, forward-looking incoming POs. How do I push out some of my POs and whatnot? So let's look at one of these skills from an inventory projection and a factory capacity standpoint. Right? So I go into production deployment, and by the way, those tiles that you were seeing up on the top represent a cognitive skill, right? And a skill is a digitized process. It's a deployment or an adjustments to your capacity plans and your inventory plans based on raw capacity data from factories at the midterm level, which is 6 to 12 months level from a factory standpoint. In this particular example, how does a planner, a production planner, or supply planner take care of those things? That process is digitized over here, which allows you to kind of automate a lot of those things that you see on those dashboards, but then also augments the work of a planner, right? It gives you recommendations on what to do. So let's click on this one example, from a factory
Hey,
capacity
Kaushal, when
standpoint.
you say a process is digitized, what are you really saying there? What do you mean?
Yes, so that's a good question. So when I say a process is digitized, say for example, you had excess inventory, sitting in one DC because of a fluctuation in demand. You had stock in the DC or the warehouse, but you didn't really need to ship it to any customer because there wasn't any order and there was excess sitting. Now, how does the factory guy know that I don't need to produce this product and I need to push out the work orders for that particular product because there's already excess sitting in most of my warehouse for that particular SKU in pallets, right? You would go manually and you would kind of make an adjustment to your plan. Your plan goes back and gets reflected into your ERP. Your person who is maintaining those POs and will look equally. And then by the time he decides to change the schedules at the factory level in PPDs or whatnot, it's already too late, right? You've already scheduled that, and it's work in progress. But imagine that process was executed by Era itself, right? And I will in the last few minutes of this call, I will show you how that process is digitized through the process builder itself. But imagine if that process was digitized. Imagine if Era was monitoring your inventory, monitoring your open orders from a sales order perspective.
This is the
Monitoring
cognitive piece, is what you're saying. When you say
your,
digitized, you really mean the cognitive piece.
exactly. So
Okay, okay. I
so
just
that
get all
process.
futzed up a lot with like digital twins, and everybody's talking digital everywhere around me, and I needed to know what you meant by that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is for real, right? We have references for some of these skills that I'm showing you, from some of these analytics that I'm showing, with all of this analytics and skills that I'm
I
showing,
mean, the
right? So
fact that
obviously,
that is in a system means it's digitized in some
yeah,
circles.
it's machine doing the work guided by people versus people doing it manually, right?
Okay, good. Yeah.
Humanly, to be honest, it's not possible to look at all SKU location factory combinations one by one, order by order, stock by stock, uh, factory schedules by factory schedules, line by line within the factory, and change schedules, push with the POs to the suppliers out.
Have you talked to AstraZeneca in the past?
I
It's a
have
joke.
personally not. I
It's a
have
joke.
personally
Don't worry about it.
Are
Because
you
that's,
say,
I
are
think
you
that's
saying
what
that you resemble those remarks?
I'm saying. That's what we do today, which is why we're talking to you, right? So,
Okay.
yeah. No, that's good stuff.
All right. So this is a classic example of how you receive a recommendation, right? So, I went through that skill. You saw an inbox of a list of recommendations. That's your inbox where a user actually gets those recommendations. And I forgot to actually explain what this view is actually. This is the cognitive workbench, right? And you can customize some of this, columns over here. So it's an intelligent inbox where all the available fields can be brought into the inbox. Gmail is kind of trying to be intelligent by putting AI on top of auto responses that potentially things are good as responses. It's kind of similar, right? So you can go into the details of this like you would go into the details of an email, but you can also accept, reject, look at the audit trails of what work has been done. You can collaborate. Say for example, I collaborate with Adrian, and I say, Adrian, move PO out, right? And then I submit this. So this is when Adrian comes back in and logs into his system. You can look at this, the show comments, right? So you can see that this comment kind of shows with the timestamp that an Adrian gets a message too, right? So he knows what I'm doing in my view, and he can take action. He can approve things, there, right? Or I can go into the details of this and evaluate what is it that the system is trying to tell me. And you can see that the available capacity, will cover 24 months of expected total production. So you are good in terms of capacity. Inventory projection shows value slightly below target in July 2019, right? So you need to do something about that. So your projection is lower. You have enough capacity to kind of cover for 24 months, but you don't need to produce everything. That means your projection is lower. That means you need to kind of adjust your production quantities as well, right? So I'm showing you at the bottom a full midterm plan, that spans out from June 19 to May 2022. I can see my plan based on net available capacity. So if the one that I'm highlighting right now is my capacity line. I can see my forward-looking demand. I can see my current selected plan. I can see my the dotted line, which is my net efficient capacity, and this is the past, right? So I can see the actuals in terms of my plan as well, right? So I have a full view of my capacity across these different KPIs.
But
And then at the bottom, I have,
what's actually showing me the consumption of that capacity though? I guess I'm not seeing it in the forward-looking piece.
yeah. So the
Like,
consumption can come through two things, right? One is through the demand that you see over here, right? So demand actually over here is not your forecasted demand, but it is your net demand that you calculate within the system, right? So net
so
demand takes into
that's the recipe hours. So if this is a resource, that would be that, okay, the granulation resource is, has a demand of X amount of hours against the available capacity.
no, this is the demand in terms of your quantity demands, right? Your production quantity demand. So when I say
Right.
net demand, it really reflects. Sorry, go ahead.
So where do I see the actual asset utilization based off the recipe hours? And,
Got a
if I'm at
dimension here.
50% utilization or 80% utilization or I'm over,
Yeah,
based on the unconstrained plan, right? Because,
yeah,
am I over the amount of hours? Where do I then know to take an action for an order?
This looks like
yeah. So
very
we'll
top
have to.
level here. You got to drill down
Yeah,
in, right?
exactly. So what you're doing here is a net available capacity, right? So it's not your gross capacity; it's your net capacity that's netted up at an aggregate level across your lines and hours, FTs, material availability, and whatnot,
Yeah.
right? So, that's what this is. But when you have a net capacity in ERA, like I showed the KPIs, you can always drill down to a line level detail as well, right? At the work center level detail, at the material level detail, and whatnot. And I'll show you another view right after this one, which will give you a more insight into, okay, this is where it comes from, right? This is where my net is calculated, overall capacity is calculated, and whatnot. Yeah. At the bottom, I have my projected stock, right, from June 20 to May 22, 2022. You can see my projected inventory across these blue bars, but I'm looking at all the buckets of my stock, and I'm looking at my cycle stock, safety stock, pre-bills in one CPG company. We also calculate the pre-bills, which is your manufacturing stock, right? So all that level of stock detail is captured. 75% of safety stock, 25% of safety my stock targets, which is my, overall average trend across all these different parameters, and the projected inventory as a result of this fluctuating net demand, that I have, right? So that this is my inventory trend, projected inventory trends across a 24-month horizon. In that, I have this much available net capacity, which looks very much okay in terms of what I have in the system. And I can clearly see that my projections are lower, which means that I probably need to produce less at some point in time, right? So I can go with the error recommendation, but I can also choose to override. I can do a manual and make a manual adjustment to the plan. I can equal it to the demand. I can equal it to the total capacity. This is production, right? So I can equal it to a 6-month recovery, 12-month recovery, 18-month recovery, and I can confirm, and it writes back this into the system, right? It changes your PO quantities for those subsequent months and subsequent weeks. So it's not the production order quantity, it's the planned order quantities in your system, which then will kind of reflect in your production quantity, order quantity targets as well. Okay, but a lot of this work was automated for you, right? So it gives you one thing as a recommendation that this is what you need to do, but then it also gives you an option to override those things and make adjustments to that on top of it, if you wanted to do that as well. I will show you another example along the same lines, but it might be slightly relevant to the questions
Hey,
you asked as well.
Michelle, before you go any further, there's no way that we can just drill down couple levels deeper in where we were,
You
because
can,
that's the
you can.
it's right at the heart of something that we're looking at. You're close, but we got to get down into the lines, but then into the machines.
Yeah.
Like if you go back and where
Mhm.
you're over your capacity, can you drill down and show us where the bottleneck is?
Yes,
Would you
that's very
just
true.
take us on a
And
little journey here? Yeah, see what is
yeah,
that? February 20 whatever?
yeah,
Can you
you
take us
can you
down
can
there?
do that. You can do that. Let me show you this other example. Maybe that might kind of take you a little bit lower down into that mode. Let me filter this by supply. And I'm looking at an SNOP view here, but at the end of the day, sorry, I don't want to filter by
Okay.
brand.
Yeah, I want to be in the S&OE layer myself.
Yeah. Exactly, right? So you want to, but
Yep.
when you are in the SNOP to SNOE layer, are you able to still make decisions? Or no, you are not, because you don't know where exactly the problem is. You're looking at a very high level picture, maybe at a brand level or at a SKU level or even at a factory level, but you want to know at the line level. You want to know at a specific SKU level, specific time, specific date, and then take decisions, right? So if I get a
Right.
recommendation like this, for example, that says production at risk due to shipment delays on a specific raw material. I need to increase quota for a supplier, plus I need to increase production. It takes me to that level of detail, right? So there are two aspects of it. I'll show you the first aspect. The first aspect is the recommendation itself, which you already saw with all the associated KPIs. But now it's taking you to a specific factory, and then it's taking you to a specific SKU code. So again, you might say, okay, I don't care about factory to the line level. But before I go to the line level, I'll show you a modeling plan associated with that same SKU, right? So I have a plan. This is built using the modeling engine. And the plan that I'm being asked to make corrections for and change production quantities and acquire raw material from a different supplier to make sure I hit my projected targets is plan 4129, right? So I go to 4129 for that SKU, and there's a bunch of SKUs, right? These are derived dimensions, from which I'm going through. Hundreds and maybe even thousands of products listed over here because these are derived dimensions. But at the end of the day, I see a full plan, demand, the average demand, which is part of my net calculations as well. My revised stock, revised inventory, opening balance, closing balance, projected inventory, revised production plan, production quantities, overrides. But then I have capacities at the bottom per line, right? In hours, shifts per line in hours, planned downtime in hours as well, right? So now this is a very exhaustive plan for a specific recommendation that I received. So when you receive a recommendation, and if I want to review my detailed plan like this, I could go into another tab and review it instead of just accepting what AI has asked me to do. When you get more, from a digital transformation perspective, a little bit more, mature in terms of the change management that you have to manage within your organization, you will start accepting more versus modifying, right? But in the beginning of the journey, you do need this level of detail to make adjustments if you still don't want to trust the system right away. But I have this
So
button called run heuristics, right? Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, so I like this view right here, right? So am I looking at a SKU? Is that what, plant 4129 and then SKU 1216
Yes,
720? Okay, so now what if
correct.
this SKU had like multiple capacities, right? It has multiple lines to make that capacity. Would I see
Yes,
multiple capacities or what would I see?
yes. In this particular case, you're looking at the line level detail. You're not just looking at the factory level detail over here, right? So it knows that this is going to the lines that produce this in total number of hours. This particular SKU has 8 hours of capacity per day, right? So that's what
Okay.
it's looking at. Now, when I run this heuristic, right, it's not just going to replan my plan based on the numbers I change in terms of projections on inventories or projections on demand or the net demand. It will look at few other things as well. First, before adjusting the production, it will look at the fact that whether there is a stock rebalancing possible. If you've identified excess inventory in other plant, can this 4129 that's listed over here get that inventory from this excess that's sitting in the other DC that will allow you to do the balancing across inventories? And what is the financial impact of that, right? You have a days cover impact, days forward cover, and days backward covered impact. And you can look at the stock quantity at the source DC and the destination DCs, for that 1216720 SKU that you're looking at, right? You can look at the logistics detail as well in terms of lead times. So, it's going to be a road transport mode of transport. It's not a full truckload, type, but it's okay. In terms of cost, you will still be fine. It's just a 1 day lead time. Do you want to produce more? Do you want to ship this access from your other DC to this DC? Very powerful heuristic run that allows you to kind of look at it holistically as well. Yes, you are in charge of manufacturing. You want to produce more, but is that the best thing to do? Then it also kind of looks at your raw material and packaging material rescheduling plan, right? By MRP controller at that level of detail, right? So MRP controller for this production is 563. Your vendor code is over here. Your order quantities, days left, active finished goods count, everything is listed over here. It's asking you to reschedule this PO with an inventory impact of $3,700, right, for that particular SKU finished goods production. The very powerful thing there as well, because at the end of the day, if you're not going to produce more, even though the plan is asking you to produce more, there is an opportunity to rebalance. If you choose to produce more, you do nothing and you accept the recommendation. If you choose to rebalance stock, you can modify by clicking modify and do the stock rebalancing option. If you do choose to produce, if you don't choose to produce more, and if you go by this recommendation, by stock rebalancing, you can also do the rule configuration and reschedule the PO that, okay, I don't need more raw materials because I'm not going to produce more. I have excess sitting in most of the DCs, which I can utilize that stock for, right? But then the decisions made for proposed alternatives, is listed over here, right? So, in this particular case, ERA recommends you to do a production. You can look at your capacity utilization. This probably you saw with Jen last week on the details of, a supply chain map. And you can look at your overall impact in terms of, revenues and costs and whatnot associated with it, right? So every single recommendation is tied to either cost, revenue, or service. And you can also customize, some of these, financial KPIs that are, tied to this, right? So that's, a good view. But then I'll come out of this and I'll show you a planning view as well, right? So something that you asked
Hey,
for in terms of more detail.
Kaushal,
Yeah.
while you're there though, just to get an idea of sort of the third piece of our brain diagram, if the person hits accept, you want to just talk about how it gets back for 20 seconds?
Yeah, so when you hit accept, there are two choices, right? You can actually write back into your system, auto write back, because the crawlers are bidirectional, and it's a synchronous or an asynchronous type write. So a synchronous write is, when error writes into the system, it then receives an acknowledgement that the write was correctly executed. Error reads what has been written so that the quantities match and there's no error. It has written in the right table, right field, and whatnot. Asynchronous write is more like, you write all the orders into the system, POs because you want to produce more, or STOs because you want to stock rebalance. And then after all the recommendations are executed, you get a bulk log of all of the things that was written, right? So, depending on, what fits the business and the use case, it writes back into those systems. If you don't choose to go with an auto write back, which is completing your autonomous, cycle of cognitive automation, in that case, you can still manually accept, the recommendation and then, manually update the data or the fields in your SAP if you wanted to do that as well, right? So depending on the level of maturity you are in terms of transformation, cognitive automation can do one of those two things for you. This is again the same view in terms of the plan that I was showing you, but you can see that we have added filters over here, right? So I can, make an adjustment to this, KPIs and the plans over here, by, plant and then plant location, plant, and then even at the work central level, right? So this is my line level, machine level detail, that is going to execute a particular plan. And these KPIs would then refresh to show, my financials, my demand side of things, and of course, my factory, KPIs, for me from that level of detail.
Here, just so that if we wanted to add, in addition to brand, let's say a particular dosage of a particular brand, or it's in a certain presentation, let's say this product, it's a pill, and this is 5 milligrams versus 10 milligrams. We could add those filters here as well, so that all of this could update as well. Because I know we could do it on supply chain maps. I know we've done it at a couple of clients, but
Absolutely.
although it's not there, we could add that there, and you now have visibility for all of your brands globally at this level of detail. If that makes sense.
I mean, you can add a lot of different filters. I'm just flashing this dashboard with all my main work centers within, all the factories. I showed you a capacity utilization dashboard. Again, that's very detailed enough at the line level as well. Just to clarify one thing, when ERA crawls data, we crawl at the lowest level of granularity. So going lower is not a problem for us. It's when you want to look at it at a higher level, at an aggregate level, is when we have to kind of, customize things for you based on what level you want to see that information at, right? You saw the movement codes, the transaction level details. That's where we touch your data sets at the raw level detail. So it's actually easy for us to do it at a lower level of granularity versus, more at a higher level, that you want to see that information.
Is,
So I'm going to
is there
pause
any
here.
question, just because I'm looking at the time, we have 10 minutes. I just want to make sure any high level questions that Jason and Mark have, I'm not excluding you, Brian, or not including you, but I know most of the questions Mark
They
and
ask a lot
Jason.
more questions than I do. Yeah, I get it.
You know, I got love for you.
Mark, the time is yours.
Yeah, I guess I still want to see this forward-looking capacity view at the work center level. And maybe it's not something you can show today, and I understand you can probably do it. But I guess for me, right, so what I'm looking for is the ability to do really operational planning. So in your, in the next, let's not say 0 to 15 days, but, from day 15 to day 90, how do I constrain a plan? And, the two elements of that is one, balancing supply to market, and one, balancing asset availability or asset utilization within plants. So right there, there's that typical trade-off from an operational perspective. And, for me, it's not as much about the analytics and the S&OP process. It's really about how do I take the unconstrained recommendations from SAP and develop that constrained plan using these tools. And the reason why I say that is because there's a little bit of a journey, right? Right now we work in silos, so it's very easy to constrain, operations within a plant. But when you're sitting above site and you're looking across the supply chain and looking at multiple plants, how do I, take a look at those assets? Where do I have hotspots? Where do I need to dive in and either do the postponement or the, the pull forward of an order so that I also understand not only the impact on the asset, but also the impact on the supply and the market. So we're very much at that operational level, right? Because if you've worked in APO, it's very much a plant product location view, but we're looking to bring all of that data above site and have individuals working above site, looking at it end to end, making these decisions. So I don't think right out of the gate, right, we're going to be able to rely on the cognitive side to say, hey, here's what you need to do. So what does it look like when you're working with this tool from a manual perspective? And some of the write back functionality, that's really interesting and that'd be really cool, but I also don't see us being there yet at phase 1 and trusting those results. So it's like, how do I do that manual operational planning above site using, like a tool like Era? And I guess that's where I'm really in the tactical space here. I'm really in the operational space, not as much the strategic executive level of, here's the analytics and here's the impacts to revenue. I mean, I'm still in that operational space of how do I constrain a plan and how do I understand the replenishment and the issues and the alerts, if you will, and then how do I make sure that my machines are constrained. So I'm still trying to get to that tactical operational level with you. And I know you can deliver it. It's just that, is there anything I can view just to feel and get a feel for it?
Yeah. Can you see my screen?
I can, yeah.
Yeah. So this is something that you just mentioned, right? I have a production team and it's a current. This is very very much like planning, right, on a daily basis. This is not. There's nothing strategic about this, but you can see a production plan at a resource level, detail over here. But you can look at the plan. You can look at the forward-looking capacities in terms of hours utilized and hours free and available. This is by resource, right? Then you can look at your days of
just go
coverage.
back a second to capacity.
Yes, please. Okay.
So this is at, let's say, one resource, right?
Yes.
What if I need to see like 20 resources at once? And maybe I don't want to see it graphically because, I'm going to get lost looking at 20 graphs. I want to see really just like a heat map of here's my utilization by period for all 20 resources down the left-hand side, your time period across, your x-axis, and like how do I kind of see that heat map, if you will?
Yeah, and that's the fact that this chart exists, for capacity.
You can get to it.
Yeah, it's built off of a table, right? Which is you can create a heat map chart or you can go to a details view. But I'll show you this factory view, right? This is where you are looking at every single factory and you can go into every single line and then you can go into a heat map view of, the overall capacity across that as well. It's just like maybe 5-minute job for us to kind of use this data to build the heat map itself, right?
Okay.
Um, but it's very much customized to what you want. So some people wanted this, so we gave it to them in this view in terms of what's available, in terms of what's utilized by resource. Since you have it by resource, you can go up above one level by factory. You can go above one level by country or market where those factories
Hey,
exist and whatnot.
Hey, Mark,
But
you
this
know
is
what might be interesting is this discussion about variables versus outputs. And
Right.
this is a case where we could bring the variables in because you're going to bring in all the calendars. You're going to bring in all the data, right?
Yep.
All the variables to recalculate. And you can look at it any way you want.
Yeah, and
Which
that's I guess what I got to get my head wrapped
it's
around, right?
the platform allows you to, I can see how the platform would allow you to do it. You know
So
what
it's
I'm
just up.
saying?
Yeah, it's
It's
for us to design the user interfaces based on our data.
no, I know. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the easy part.
So,
It's
right.
I'm just
Yeah, exactly. So
uh,
it's look, this is a forward-looking production current plan, right? It's current week plus
Yep.
1 plus 2 plus 7 week plan, but which material are going on which resources, especially 143 resource. So what you're producing on what date, and on the 22nd, this is being produced, this is being produced here, this is being produced here. Your revised production plan shows the changes over here. You can see the impact of those changes, but you can also see the days on hand coverage, and then you can do scenario planning on that as well, right? I can use a specific scenario, use scenario 1, use scenario 2, and just see what the impact looks like. I can see what the excess and shortage plans look like on from an
Kushal.
inventory perspective.
Yeah, Kushal. The what if we ECC does a pretty good job of calculating capacity. Our problem that we have is we have 7 sites or 7 instances, and our sites are spread across those incidents. We don't necessarily need to recalculate what SAP already does. But the debate that we have is do we bring the variables into our operations hub and then try to recalculate the logic, which we would rather not do it. We would let a ECC calculate it, bring it in, and then really almost display it. And how would you go about making a choice knowing the technology that you have? Bring the values in, recalculate it, no problem, or bring in, and what we're talking about is what, CMO1, right, Mark?
Yeah, so like CMO1, a simple transaction, right, shows you your machine utilization. It already has all the logic built in of calendar availability, et cetera.
Like it's
And
already
that
doing for
works.
us what we need. The problem is that we can't see it in aggregate across we don't have access to it easily, right?
Right. So that makes it even more easier for us, right? I mean,
Right.
when you have all that systems information pre-built into some system, and some you have to bring and recalculate in Era. But what all KPIs you have calculated somewhere else in terms of capacity or whatnot, like Unilever does that today, right? Unilever doesn't, and this is public knowledge. It's not specific use cases are known, but we do digital transformation for them where the KPIs that they calculate, in certain systems. On their HANA reporting system, for example, or whatever, they bring it in Era as is. There's no point recalculating twice. But the way you can use this information, like I was showing you different examples from a detailed production plan to a production deployment to a midterm capacity, by resource, by line, analytics, so many KPIs, the ability to do that weekly plan, and this is one other example that you are seeing on the screen right now. You can see the postponement of raw material purchase orders by MRP controller that is touching a specific finished goods production lines rescheduling, right? So because you are asked to reschedule a production instead of this week to next week, you're probably even, postponing a PO from a supplier, because it has that backward, upstream visibility as well in terms of what's coming, and downstream visibility in terms of projections and forecasts. So looking at something very powerful that can be operationally used, and people are, like I showed you on the screen. You can customize this if you want, but you're right. I mean, if some of those things already exist, it's good for you to bring all that multi-system data in one place in Era, and then start leveraging some of these out-of-the-box capabilities, and then also customize.
Well,
I'll show you one last thing, which will. Sorry, go ahead.
it's just It's just, is anybody is, would be interesting to know is if you guys are already doing, why can't, Mark, can we just state exactly what we're trying to do to these guys and then let them take a look at it and say, you know what? Yeah, other people have done this, right?
Yeah. I mean, you want me to
There's a
share my
more
screen and
direct
show
path.
some of the requirements?
I'd like to see other people have done it and they're doing it with Era, and this is how we're doing it. Because
Yeah.
ultimately, Adrian and Tom, we have to make a decision on whether we're going to go build this ourselves or whether we're going to go buy this.
Understood.
You know what I'm saying? And I don't want to hear we can do it. I want to see if you've done it before, and then we're at least have you guys say this is how we would do it, and try to demonstrate that to us. And I
Yeah,
think
we're-
that
We're
would be
straightforward people. We'll tell you if we've done it before, if
Yeah.
we can do it, but we've not done it before, and what's our degree of confidence, and then you got to make your call.
Mark. Would we be able to share?
I mean, I can share my layouts, my proposed layouts, right, and what I'm after, and walk through it a little bit if we have the time, or we can
Why
set
don't
up
we
another
do
meeting.
that?
Yeah, I have time. I don't know if Kaushal, you have an extra 10 or 15 minutes?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump
Um,
off. But you guys go. Can you mind? I mean, Mark's perfectly got this, but I have to go to another meeting.
Thanks,
and,
Jason.
and just so you know, Jason, before you hop, for a top three pharma company, the stuff that you're asking about, we're doing at a line level, at an equipment level. All of the stuff that you've asked about, we just don't have it in our demo environment, listing it all out. But for a top three pharma, we're doing this today.
Perfect.
I mean, people fully trained, using it for their supply reviews, inventory reviews.
Perfect.
So yeah.
So I'll just show you what I've had in mind from my BI team and what I've been pushing for to get. And we can just see if it lines up with what you guys are maybe delivering today, if that works.
Yeah.
So just give me a minute to pull each of these up. There's multiple versions. One. Okay, so I can share my screen.
Yep.
So I'm going to start with capacity because I think that's the one that we're having the most difficult time. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Okay. So what am I looking for? From a capacity perspective, what I'm looking for essentially is something like this. Location, so what's the plant location? What's the resource? So you can see compression machine A, packaging line A. Capacity category, is it a labor capacity or is it a resource capacity? The number of capacities, so do I have 2, 3, 4 machines driving availability or do I just have one? What's my brand? What's my product? And that's kind of for some drill down technology. So then you would see okay, you would have your time horizon across the top. You would have your resource sum, right? So utilization of this resource is 40% in week 1 based on availability, 90% in week 2, 60% in week 3, and going out through the horizon. Then you would see it kind of, okay, of that utilization, how many hours are consuming and how many available hours should I have based on my available thing. Then I want the ability to say, let's drill down into this 40% and say, okay, for brand A and product A and brand B and product B, I'm consuming 20% of each of these, right? So now if I drill down again into that 40% or that 20% each, what planned order, what process order is it that is driving me to be at that 20% or that 30%? And where that's important is where I have an overload so that I can go back into the system and correct that order or smooth that order backward or forward. Now, if we had the ability to also include the order volume, that would be great, and also the order source of supply, right? So you can imagine, right, that we're going to have alternate resources that this can be run on. So APO is going to give me a default and say, okay, I want you to run on this recipe, but I might have 4 other recipes that are alternates, either from granulation, compression. It's going to change that whole equipment routing on how I might produce that product. So that's very much, kind of simply, right? I want to see all of the resources in all of the locations. So think if I'm a brand planner for brand A, I come in, I filter by brand A, I can see all the resources from API through packaging that are, driving the delivery across different plants of that product from, again, API through packaging. And now I see all the resources, I see all the utilizations, and I can quickly go in to wherever I have a rag of above utilization and say, okay, I either need to postpone or pull forward. And when I do that, right, it's going to have an impact on my replenishment. So at the very detailed level, I also say, okay, show me an aggregated view where all I'm seeing is the resources. I'm not seeing any of the drill down capability, but then I have the ability to drill down. And that very much is going to allow me to kind of cut and slice that data above site rather than going screen by screen in APO and saying, okay, this location, this resource, now let me click out of it. It gives me that holistic view of utilization across my forward-looking time horizon, and where do I then need to go smooth or move orders so that I get the correct result back in the, from a, showing me that I am constrained by capacity.
Is this more of a BI view that then the human is going to go think through the pulling forward or pushing out, or is this
Yes.
Scenario modeling where it shows knock-on effects, etc.?
Nope, this is a BI view where it's gonna highlight to me where I can go and change the orders, right? So in the very beginning of this, we weren't looking at getting very sophisticated, right? Right now, capacity planning at AstraZeneca is at a very low maturity level. Planners aren't used to constraining capacity for 90 days. They're used to allowing auto replenishment out past weeks 2. And for that reason, sometimes we don't understand service risk. We drive a lot of bullwhip throughout, different nodes of the supply chain. So what I could imagine though is, in ERA, clicking into this process order, it pulling up saying, okay, the order start date is, June 1st. Well, if I push it out to June 8th, and then it rewriting back to APO, that would be great, right? If I have that rewrite capability. I mean, it's a requirement that, somebody has put forth, but, trying to handle that with internal tools and with the timeline we have is probably not, an option. So that's why I haven't mocked up that capability here. But yeah, it's very much a BI report that shows me where am I high, where am I low, how do I smooth it, and jump into it from there. And then it kind of just brings those exceptions, right, that I need to then go ahead and plan in the APO system.
Kaushal, can you respond to that, please?
Yeah, that's actually, if you look at it, right, Mark, thanks for sharing this first of all. But if you look at what we showed you today in terms of looking at it by order, by by work order, by work center in one dashboard. But I think what you're looking for is capacity in percentage. But that's pretty much something that we can slice and dice different, right? It's just that.
Yeah. So yeah, it's capacity not only in utilization, but also in hours. It's forward looking, and then it's the ability to drive down into those exceeding capacity situations and say, okay, what decision do I need to take as a planner? So agree that that it's not, looking for cognitive and looking for recommendations yet. I don't think we're at a maturity level for that yet, because I think when you jump into our data, you're going to learn, oh, wow, we need to refine some of these recipes the more we do capacity planning. So we need to kind of get to that level of master data maturity before we can rely on any system recommendations.
Yeah, but obviously, when we bring in all this data, with all the existing out of the box KPIs, and even if we have to customize something, we'll customize it for you. But I personally don't see anything that's not doable or doesn't exist right now there, right? I mean, it's just a different view and a slice that we showed you today with different types of production plan and capacity and, balancing project and whatnot, right? So.
And I think that's what I'm getting at. Like when we look at a brand, it's not as though a brand comes into one factory, goes on one resource and comes out, right? It's the brand goes through multiple factories. It goes through multiple resources even within one factory. And then, we get a finished product that we can deliver to a customer. So the complexity, is high. And that's where, not only do I need to be able to look at this, across brand, right? So I can see the brand and the assets across the brand for all stages of manufacturing, which is something I can't do today in APO. I would have to go screen by screen, SKU by SKU to get that understanding. Another piece, if I just continue sharing, that's kind of the capacity piece and what we're looking for. The other piece that we're looking for is the forward-looking inventory piece. So if I show you for a minute what I have envisioned for that, again, we have our source site, our destination location, brand, product, bunch of different master data, things that we would like to cut and slice. On-hand inventory today, how much of it's restricted stock, how much of it's unrestricted stock, how much of it's on hold, what's my current month forecast, batch size if it's applicable, safety stock and target stock, what does that look like in both quantities and also in days of supply, what's my targets, and then really forward looking, okay, how many days of supply am I projecting for each week? So now you can see, for example, like anywhere that I'm ragged red, I need to jump in and I need to rebalance replenishment and then look at how it impacts capacity. Anywhere that I might be blue means I'm above target. I need to go ahead and delay those orders. And then, not only am I looking at the projected weeks of supply, but then, here's my end of week inventories. Here's my, weekly supply plan based on availability. So that would say, okay, if this was sending me over, then then I need to postpone that. If I still wasn't, meeting my safety stock or my target stock, I might need to increase that quantity. I need to then toggle back and look at the capacity implications. Also looking at, what's my weekly demand, and, any expected short dating or expiry as well. So kind of gives me that full view of supply and demand, per product, per brand. And again, I can quickly look at, this could be 1,000 SKUs, but I'm going to rag by, what shows me as red in weeks 1 through 4, what shows me in regs in weeks 4 to 8, and then I'm going to go take action, right? So it's kind of driving me to have that exception-based planning approach.
Makes sense. I'll let Kaushal speak to it, but from what you just showed, to me, just looks, from my perspective, how that would look in error is you have your filters on the side, and you would have this dashboard automatically populated. We would also probably give you recommendations so that for these things that are in red, error is recommending that you do one of these 3 things, and you choose which one to do, or you could override it. But based on your history and based on your decisions in the past, or what you think you should be doing in certain situations, Arrow would recommend that automatically to the planner so that they don't have to do all of this analysis or toggle between different
And
spreadsheets.
that's exactly right, Adrian. And of course, like you mentioned, Mark, right? I mean, you don't want to start with that. You just want to go with the basics. And I completely agree with what is said, which is those are filters for us, and we can create that planning view, right? The modeling
So,
grid that I was showing you
yeah.
with. So
So
because
Kushal,
these
let me
KPIs
talk.
are all there, right, in the system.
There's some caveats, right? So one of the issues that we're having for capacity analytics is that we have a mixed landscape of how we do planning in APO. So for many of our sites, we're only using S&P planning books. So I'm not sure how
Hmm.
familiar you are with the S&P planning books and the
Very much,
capacity.
very much. Hmm.
Capacity is bucket oriented in S&P. So for example, if I have a planned order that has 6 operations and they have buffers and they have lead times and they might span over across 2 or 3 weeks in actuality, all the capacity in the S&P planning book appears to be consumed on day 1, which is not reality, right? Because it doesn't do that MRP explosion and schedule by operation. On the flip side, we have probably our 4 biggest sites that are on PPDS where I have the time continuous capacity. Right now, our PPDS sites are probably more mature in doing capacity planning because it's time continuous and they can rely on the tool. The S&P sites are like, I can't rely on this bucket-oriented approach. It doesn't give me any realistic, approach. It shows me that I'm doing granulation, compression, and coding all on the same day, which isn't even possible. So that's why we were looking to go to an ECC approach and say, okay, let's pull the data from CM01, pull it into our BI layer, because in ECC it does break down the S&P orders and make it time continuous. But the issue with that is then, if I'm going to have multiple data sources depending on the sites, right? So for PPDS sites, I want to pull the APO data because that's where I'm managing availability information and that's where I'm managing the continuous capacity. Whereas for S&P sites, I probably want to pull it from ECC and then ensure that I'm managing the availability there, and then I at least have the time continuous capacity. So like starting to look into some of those technical landscapes, right? That's where it gets to be difficult. And how do I model data for some sites versus others? And that's kind of probably where you need like some sort of control table in the back end, right? To say for, plant A, I'm pulling these data variables. For plant B, I'm pulling these data variables because they're of a different landscape.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the that's where where we can probably I can see help you is since we can pull in the data from those multiple disparate systems and where exactly you need to use what information to build this particular plan. That is where we can help you the most to start with, right? At least from a BI or analytics perspective with reports, dashboards, in the same view that you've shown us here over here right now. Because what I'm not worried about is the complexity of your factories or complexity of your processes because we work with very large, very very large companies with similar
Right.
problems and similar landscapes, right? So that's not an issue as long as we know that you're not going to ask us to do a detailed scheduling on the first day. This
No,
is
yeah.
not for us. Yeah, yeah. So because
Okay.
I'm very confident you saw all the KPIs that you're showing me in each
Yeah.
one of these columns. We are also
Yeah.
doing bad in neurology today. Very, very large pharma company, two of them, one in Europe. That genealogy is very complex. And the way we do it and with the way we provide the drill downs, is very much what we'll appreciate from that standpoint too.
Yeah, and we're under CDA, right? So I'll share this with you, and I just also would ask you that you be careful with depending on who comes on later calls from an AstraZeneca perspective, because this isn't public knowledge within our company. The big change here is that we're going from operating in supply chain nodes and doing planning per node, so everyone's very much optimizing what they do within their own site today, to pull all of that responsibility of planning above site, right? Which then means we're going to have brand planners looking across a network, putting together an end-to-end plan, which means, in local sites today, when you don't have good capacity planning, you can say, you can go talk to the manufacturing supervisor. You can go say, hey, can you do this? Can you do that? Whereas I really need above site to be able to have data that supports understanding the constraints and the capacity planning. And I need the ability to cut and slice data at a mass level because I'm looking across a whole network and not just one node of the supply chain. So that's
Yeah.
really like when we are looking at developing this internal, it's really about pulling all that data above site, being able to cut and slice it with a brand lens and being able to then see quickly where the issues are, where we need to then go concentrate really in APO, because we just imagine that we would never be able to get out of working in APO and then go and make the corrections in APO. So like, if you're familiar with the alert monitor in APO, it's very
Yeah.
annoying. It's by product, it's by location,
Yeah.
right? And you get an alert for every day that you're over capacity, you get an alert for every day you're under safety stock, and it's like, well, I don't want to see all of those alerts because really I just need to see the one that shows I'm below safety stock, right? So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to manage by exception and bring all the data above site so that above site planner then can plan end to end in the network.
Yeah, that's a fantastic use case for us to just even do a pilot, huh? To be honest, Mark, this is, crawling into APO and writing back into APO or, ECC, and combining all of that and then, making sure you get the, in our case, you won't get alerts by exception. You will get recommendations by exceptions. And then, of
Right.
course, you can do some manual planning with the scenarios that you just saw and, you can modify numbers and go with the best, right? Of course, you have a recommendation, but you,
Yeah.
you still get
Like,
an
yeah.
option to plan.
So for like a replenishment perspective, I imagine having like a brand dashboard, right? So that you
Hmm.
can look at replenishment by brand across all the nodes and make sure that you're well balanced and your service risk is going to be high. And then from the other side, I imagine having like an asset dashboard where I'm looking at my capacity and my utilizations, and then I can filter by brand or by asset and see, because there's going to be even trade-offs within one asset for different brands, right? And then that's where I need to then go look at the replenishment map and say, okay, which one do I prioritize based on current stock level and projected stock levels, and what are the impacts? Um, So that's a little bit how I imagine it, but yeah, I mean, I imagine with an Era tool that we can get a lot more sophisticated than what we can get within our own BIBW capabilities. So like, the ability to pull up a process order after I drill down into a resource and say, move this out 1 week and have it right back to APO. I mean, goodness, that's great, right? And then maybe even be able to simulate the results on the days of supply side of it, right, without having to wait overnight for the run to see the impact. This is really great, right? I mean, this is what we're after in the longer term, but again, I would say in the short term, we got to crawl before we walk and run.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And like I said, this is a very good use case for us. And plus, you get all the other stuff as well, right? I mean, when you crawl into the system, you get out of the box other stuff that's not
Yeah.
specific to the task, which is beneficial, right? It's something
Yeah,
that
well,
you'll appreciate.
for example, right, like, one of the leaders in supply chain is what's the value of inventory across the supply chain? And when we try and pull it, from BWBI, we miss the ability to get what's in transit. We miss the ability to get what's in WIP and not necessarily GR'd. And, to create all that logic across, 7 different systems and landscapes, Brian can attest to it. It's a nightmare. And, once someone finds one flaw, right, then the report's no good and nobody wants to look at it anymore.
So I think this is super helpful to have us understand exactly what you're trying to do. How should we think about next steps? Because you've seen some of the grains that the system can get down to in terms of ingestion, and the KPIs that it can bring in directly from the systems that already exist in ECC or APO. Using that granularity to build up to these views is fairly straightforward for us. Where should we go from here, Mark?
Yeah, so this is probably a better discussion for Jason and Bill.
Okay.
But if I were putting my lens on it, right, I think the initial discussion was like, hey, we have an opportunity to do a pilot with Era, mainly because the piece that we haven't covered and you're already aware of is that we need to visualize our network as well, from API to finished pack into market. So we need those visualization maps as well. So that's the third piece on top of the replenishment and the capacity. So I think we originally thought that we would be able to deliver the capacity analytics and the replenishment analytics internally, and that we would have to outsource the maps, right? So the maps was kind of where we're like, there was an offer maybe for a free pilot. Let's see if that works for our pilots. And let's go down that route. So I think if we're talking about trying to meet all of these requirements, I think there needs to be some discussion with Jason and Bill about, what that cost looks like, what can be done for pilot, maybe, free of charge or proof of concept, and then, what would the cost look like to be able for us to use this tool during our pilot. That's a better question to be understood by Jason and Bill because they really lead up the analytics team. I'm more so putting together the business requirements of what I require from their team. So that's probably a better conversation for Jason and Bill, I would say at this point.
But this gets quite specific on the pieces. And did you see what you needed to believe that from a granularity standpoint that we can get down to bare metal to build up to what you need? Or do you have any other questions?
No, I think that you guys clearly show that you can deliver more data than I'm even looking for right now. But yeah, I mean, you guys are at the nitty gritty of the level of detail to make these recommendations and such. So I'm comfortable, right? You're pulling in recipe data, you're pulling in routing data, you're pulling in days of coverage. I mean, these are all standard key figures for the most part within APO or ECC. So I know you guys have the ability to have the data, and then it's just about how awesome can we get that the user interface makes it really easy for the end user to work with.
Visualization is critical.
Yeah, that's the whole thing, right? The user interface. It's like if I hand my dad an iPad versus I hand him versus I hand him the Samsung iPad. I think a lot of people would prefer to look at the iPad, right? So that's the difference for me.
Well, I think, Mark, we'll be able to be iterative. So the first cut of it will give you what you want. And then, if we need to tweak it a little bit to make it even more user-friendly or better for the planners so that we get that stickiness so that they love it and are using it all of the time, we'll make those modifications. That's what the platform is built to do. It makes it easy to make those adjustments in minutes. Kaushal didn't go into he could build those things out in like minutes. So
that's the life cycle of any development, right? Give them something simple. Let them work with it. Let them better understand the usability requirements that they require, and then you build on. So yeah, I mean, I'm very much aligned to that approach.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time. Thank you, Kaushal.
Yeah,
I know
thanks, guys.
we pulled you in
Thank you,
last
Kaushal.
minute.
No worries. This is very helpful, though, Mark. Thank you so much for showing all this as well. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much as well.
Mark,
Have a good
all
one.
right.
Bye-bye.
Mark, before you head off, can I grab
Yeah.
you for a second while others drop off?
I'm going to
Sure,
drop off.
that's
right
fine.
now.
Right,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
First of all, thank you guys for going over, and it's hard to get
Yeah.
Kaushal's time, but when we get it, he knows the platform better than anyone, and he's